Hey, it's Joe Bartel from RotoWire. I think one of the more interesting conversations to have this year is whether you're fading the tight end position, and not just fading Brock Bowers or Trey McBride, who go in the second or third round, but fading the entire position, as in waiting to make one of the last tight end selections either in your league or in the entire draft itself. There's a really easy way to go ahead and experiment with this, and it's with the RotoWire mock draft tool. So I want to go over that exact process today and kind of see what the results end up looking like. All right, so here you can see our RotoWire mock draft tool. This is free for everyone. If you just log in, you don't even have to have a subscription to RotoWire itself. You can use this mock draft tool for free. The draft assistant portion does require a RotoWire subscription. YouTube 15 gets you 15% off that right now today. But for this example and for the mock draft exercises, whether it is fading tight ends, fading quarterbacks, taking multiple of positions within the first 3 rounds, the mock draft tool on RotoWire, I think is the best place to go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and take a look at this right now. Again, I'm just going ahead and through some of the basic stuff. So just tight end draft is going to be what I'm going to name this, tight end draft. At the moment, we have the snake format for this. You can also go to just 1 through 12 straight, third round reversal, which is popular in Superflex and FFC drafts. I'll select my team, and the team also represents the player spot as well too. The team also represents the draft slot in which you're doing for this. And in my mind, fading tight end doesn't really matter. Guys like Brock Bowers come back mid-second round, Trey McBride late second, early third round. But for this example, we're going to go ahead and go take team 8 because I think this can be part of the exercise process for this. Half point, we're going to go full point PPR, and then just for the leagues that I end up playing in, often ends up being 3 receivers. Go ahead and save that. Again, often operating off of 10, 12, 8 teams. You can do whatever you want for that, but we'll stick with our 12-team draft. The part about this I think is interesting will be choose for me with the draft plan strategy itself. We're going to let the computer just come together right away, and we're going to see what happens here for this. So you'll see right away it's going to the 8th overall pick. Again, we are going to operate in this mock draft exercise without any sort of tools being used in this other than the RotoWire mock draft itself. We're going to go through all the things over the left-hand side, but the most important part is going in with a strategy that you want to test out. That's one of the great parts about this. It's free either as an app or on the desktop side of things too. So go ahead and boot up rotowire.com, go to the mock draft assistance, and fire away here for this. So we'll have the 8 overall pick. There's a bit of variance built in. I think Saquon Barkley, for example, is one of those players that probably doesn't get to 8 in most of your drafts. There's a bit of variance built into their drafts, and I think it's a really unique thing just to make sure that you can prep for every sort of angle and possibility. I call it the AC factor, alcohol consumed. Maybe it's the BC factor, beverages consumed, but we all understand if we're doing one of these drafts in person with our buddies, maybe they are determined. Maybe they have decided to do other things while the draft is going on, and we can take advantage of that with a little bit of this variance built into it. So Saquon Barkley falls to the number 8 overall pick here. For this example, I do want to come back and check some of our options. You can go ahead and look at the draft picks before then, Jahmyr Gibbs, Malik Neighbors, Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's pretty typical that you'll normally end up seeing. And from the draft board perspective, same here too. Again, Jefferson, Bijan Robinson, Jamar Chase. Chase falling to 3 is unlikely, but again, maybe some AC factors included in this. For our exercise, again, fading the tight end position for basically as long as we can in the draft, I'm going to go ahead and take one of these receivers. And I think in this case, for me, we'll click over the receiver tool, Brian Thomas, Puka Nacua, Nico Collins. I'll take Brian Thomas with the hope that I can get one of these guys coming back. All right, and here you go. Again, showcasing the mock draft tool itself. You have a few of these for you suggested options like A.J. Brown, Lab McConkey. McConkey, I think, goes a little bit later on. There's our one little pitfall here, Mr. Brock Bowers, who would totally be a normal selection at this point. Again, with the 4th or 5th pick come back in the second round, Brock Bowers typically goes there. We are going to fade the tight end position and see what that roster looks like with this mock draft tool. So I'll just go off the recommended stuff for most of these picks early on. Not so much that this is what Joe Bartel would do, but to showcase how the app is also fluctuating with the fact that we are fading the tight end position. So I'll take A.J. Brown, comfortable with that selection. Normally I'll go running back at this point, Jonathan Taylor, Bucky Irving, if that's the case, but A.J. Brown will be the correct call for this exercise. All right, we're back again. You can see with one of those picks here at 3-8, we'll have our choice of running backs. You got Chuba Hubbard in there, and that's also pushing it up because we have 2 receivers already on our roster in Brian Thomas, A.J. Brown. The RotoWire mock draft tool will already start suggesting 2 running backs, given that you've faded the running back position to this point. Interesting that Chase Brown is left. Typically, that's an early 3rd round pick, maybe mid-3rd round. So to get him at 3-8, I think there's a lot of great value. Breece Hall, James Cook, Chuba Hubbard. Again, emphasizing all these running backs because at this point, we had only taken 2 receivers, Brian Thomas, A.J. Brown. You can see the rest of the rosters on the site here with that. And if you want to go through this more too, with the draft board itself, going back and looking at other picks, Trey McBride, pretty typically an early third round selection. We are doing what we can to fade the tight end position in this draft and kind of seeing how it plays out. So to fit the mold of everything else, just for this practice run, we'll go ahead and take the suggested for you player. In this case, Chase Brown. I think a tremendous value at this point of the draft. All right, coming back again, we have more running backs, given that we had taken 2 receivers to start. I would be ecstatic if Amari Hampton is available at this portion of my draft. Again, early 4th round, on the coming out of the 4th round pick. I think Amari Hampton has a lot of opportunity to be a fantasy-relevant difference maker, not just volume, plug-and-play sort of player, but difference maker right away. And I would imagine by the end of draft season, as this Najee Harris thing continues to go on, the Chargers have more and more training camp hype videos directed towards Amari Hampton, their first-round selection. We're going to see Hampton drafted more in the late 3rd round, but early 4th round. We'll go ahead and make this call. My one default away from it, but I think this will be more representation of what happens throughout draft season. So Amari Hampton off the board. All right, as you can see, we're progressing through again just from the draft board, which I think is really insightful, looking at all these sort of picks. A lot of receivers going off at this point. You had more of these a lot of receivers going off the board at this point. You had a few of these running backs as well. We have Sam Laporta become the 3rd tight end there. Joe Burrow's another quarterback. As we're going back to this for you recommended page, it's really nice. Again, if I was to just say, I'm going to let the RotoWire mock draft tool do this all on my own and see what happens if I just don't take a tight end, it's going to be a really interesting exercise. So receivers now, at this point, I think are really good value points. George Pickens, Xavier Worthy, Jameson Williams. But if you are looking for some of these rookies or even like the quarterbacks there, you have Patrick Mahomes, for example, Travion Henderson, likely not drafted at this point or going to be drafted for my next selection with that highlighted point there, which I really think is really useful. Xavier Worthy, though, probably gone. If there's a possibility of trying to stack the 2 Chiefs players, Mahomes and Xavier Worthy, interesting. Mark Andrews, again, trying to fade the tight end position. We are now operating on this idea that we will not take a tight end to one of our last selections, 2% to be drafted, so we might see the tight ends pushed up a little bit more. And then also TJ Hawkinson, right around that same range as well, too, but the highest upside player being Mark Andrews. We'll go back to this one, and again, I want to see what happens if we take just the suggested for you players and how that roster builds out so long as we're avoiding tight ends. So George Pickens off the board for me, and coming back around, you still have Travion Henderson again. Now, this is where if you're going just running back, receiver, whatever else in your first ones, we'll go through the roster page itself again. 2 running backs, 3 receivers. There is a flex play, but very, very soon the system is going to start pushing up the positions you don't have. And I think at this point, with the depth that you're trying to accumulate, you can still take one of the running backs, still take one of the receivers. I'll go Travion Henderson for this exercise, but I would typically take Juwan Jennings. I know the soft tissue injury for Juwan Jennings is already happening early in training camp, as it feels like every Niners receiver. But in the event that Juwan Jennings is healthy, and more importantly, Brandon Ayuk is not, I think that's going to be a big catalyst as to Juwan Jennings having a fantasy relevant season. So going with Travion Henderson with this pick. For the sake of trying to get through this a little bit faster and to make sure I'm highlighting all the great things that are happening in this mock draft itself, I'm going to make a few of the selections, burn through, we'll hit the fast forward button, and we'll come back to around round 14 or 15 after we've entirely faded the tight end position. All right, we've hit round 13, and at this point, all the suggested for yous are tight ends, and it's a bleak looking scenario. Hunter Henry, Zach Ertz, Mike Gesicki, Isaiah Likely. And you're going to see that in every one of these, the value meter will be relatively low. In terms of tight end production for top 5 overall tight ends, lower on that one. Zach Ertz, of course, probably the lowest because that guy is too decrepit to actually play football at this point in his career. The upside scenarios aren't very high. And then more importantly, the chances to be drafted for your next pick are relatively low for some of these. Now, the system is indicating Hunter Henry. Given that there's some value for you, there is a bit more upside potential than a few of these other guys. But again, Hunter Henry, Zach Ertz, Mike Gesicki, Isaiah Likely, Brenton Strange, my guy, Mason Taylor, and we'll get to this in just a second, but it took until round 13 for it to be a complete full table of suggested tight ends for you. And the great part about this is that the rest of the draft is using the AI adaptive tools that we have to operate knowing that we're fading the tight end position. So you can kind of go see all these different little selections. I think it's fascinating to go over this sort of strategy and process for free on the RotoWire mock draft tool. Again, only 3 more rounds until the end of the draft. We're going to make one more selection. I'm just going to go ahead and make a pick at at the running back position, and we'll just say it's Ray Davis. At this point, the for you is going to effectively scream. We're seeing kickers go off the board point. Take a tight end. Take a tight end. All right, we'll go ahead and take Mason Taylor, one of my guys, and I think my favorite sleepers at the position this year. And there you go. Again, with the insights happening at the moment with these different rosters, you can go through this. We still are sitting finally our first tight end off the board, but every other team has already been making a lot of these selections as well too. So something just to consider if you want to test out a theory, you want to fade tight end, you want to fade quarterback, you want to take 2 tight ends, for example. The RotoWire mock draft tool has you covered with this. YouTube 15 gets you 15% subscription off of RotoWire itself to use the mock draft assistant, and it'll tell you exactly why you should take a tight end earlier. But just using this mock draft tool for free, just so long as you have a username to RotoWire, you can use this mock draft tool for free.